Nathan Calloway stopped pushing the mop before anyone else noticed the sound. It wasn't loud. Most people wouldn't have heard it over the steady rhythm of conveyors and hydraulic pumps. But somewhere beneath the humming steel, a faint vibration repeated every 43 seconds. He checked his watch. 43. Again. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening instead of looking. The vibration wasn't getting stronger. It was getting closer together. That worried him more. The night shift inside Hawthorne Precision Systems was almost over. Rows of automated equipment stretched across the brightly lit production floor, assembling surgical components with machine-like perfection. Every hour the facility stayed online meant thousands of life-saving medical devices moved one step closer to hospitals across the country. Nathan dipped the mop into the bucket, wrung it out, and continued across the polished concrete. On paper, he was only a sanitation technician. His job description fit neatly on half a page. Keep the production floor clean. Dispose of industrial waste. Report spills. Nothing more. Years ago, his work had been very different. Now, after losing his wife and choosing a schedule that allowed him to raise his 11-year-old son alone, he had stopped explaining his past to people. Most co-workers assumed he had always cleaned factory floors. It was easier that way. People rarely asked questions once they believed they already knew the answer. Before we go any further, tell me something about yourself. How old are you? Where are you watching from? And have you ever been underestimated because of the job you did? Nathan reached the maintenance terminal mounted beside the production line and entered another observation. Recurring vibration near press line 4. Frequency increasing. Recommend inspection before next maintenance cycle. He pressed submit. The screen flashed. Report received. He knew exactly where that report would probably end up. Buried beneath dozens of higher priority requests. Again, still writing novels? Nathan turned. Curtis Donnelly, the production supervisor, stood with a clipboard tucked under one arm. Nathan smiled politely. Just documenting what I heard. Curtis glanced at the screen without reading it. You know what your problem is? Nathan didn't answer. You spend too much time thinking about equipment that isn't your responsibility. Nathan looked toward the enormous enclosed machine across the floor. I'm thinking about the people standing next to it. Curtis sighed. We have engineers. I know. We have maintenance. I know. And neither group asked for advice from the guy holding the mop. The words hung in the air. Nathan simply nodded. I understand. He truly did. Arguing wouldn't make anyone listen. After Curtis walked away, Nathan erased nothing from the report. Instead, he pulled a small spiral notebook from his back pocket and wrote down the exact time, the rhythm of the vibration, and the temperature reading displayed on the nearest panel. He had developed the habit years earlier. Systems forgot things. Paper usually didn't. At 6:30 that morning, Nathan clocked out and gathered the few personal items from his locker. A folded family photo, his lunch container, a paperback novel. As he closed the locker door, a member of Human Resources approached with an uncomfortable expression. Mr. Calloway, before you leave, we'd like to speak with you. Nathan looked at the unopened sunrise beyond the loading dock windows. Somehow, he already knew this conversation had nothing to do with a mop, or the sound that no one else seemed willing to hear. The Human Resources office was barely large enough for 3 people. Nathan Calloway sat quietly across from a polished conference table while an HR representative slid a folder toward him. Beside her sat Curtis Donnelly, the production supervisor, avoiding eye contact. We've completed our staffing review, the representative began. Due to operational restructuring, your position is being eliminated effective immediately. Nathan looked down at the paperwork. Not once did it mention the maintenance reports he had filed. Not once did it mention performance. Only restructuring. He read every page before picking up the pen. You can leave your security badge with me, the HR representative said gently. Nathan unclipped the badge from his shirt and placed it on the table. Will someone at least review the vibration reports I submitted? Curtis leaned back in his chair. Our maintenance department has everything under control. Nathan nodded once. I hope you're right. He stood, thanked the HR representative for treating him respectfully, picked up the small cardboard box containing his belongings, and walked out without another word. Outside, the cool autumn air felt sharper than usual. His 12-year-old pickup truck started on the second try, just as it always did. Before driving home, he stopped at Owens Elementary School. Wednesday mornings were special. Even after working overnight, Nathan always made time to drive his son to school. Owen climbed into the passenger seat carrying a half-finished model airplane. "Did you lose your job?" Nathan glanced at him. "How did you know? You never pick me up this early." Nathan smiled despite himself. "You're getting too smart. I learned from you." They drove in comfortable silence for a minute before Owen spoke again. "Are we going to be okay?" Nathan didn't answer immediately. He had promised himself years ago that he would never lie to his son simply to make difficult moments feel easier. "We'll have to be careful for a while." "Does that mean no pizza Fridays?" Nathan laughed quietly. "It might mean homemade pizza Fridays. I like yours better anyway." That answer made the weight on Nathan's shoulders feel just a little lighter. After dropping Owen at school, he drove home to the small rental house they had lived in since his wife passed away. The place wasn't fancy. A narrow front porch, a tiny backyard, a garage that barely fit the truck. But every shelf inside had been built by Nathan's own hands. Every room held memories that belonged to them. He placed the cardboard box on the kitchen table and began organizing unemployment paperwork when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Then again. Finally, he answered. "Nathan Calloway. This is Hawthorne Precision Systems." He recognized the receptionist's voice. "We've been trying to reach you. I noticed. Could you please hold?" "For Ms. Evelyn Brooks." Nathan frowned. "The CEO?" "Yes, sir." A long silence followed before another voice came onto the line. Confident. Professional. Calm. "Mr. Calloway, this is Evelyn Brooks. What can I do for you? I understand you no longer work for us." "That happened about an hour ago." Another brief silence. "I need to ask you a question." Nathan waited. "Our primary production line stopped 42 minutes after your shift ended." He looked toward the notebook resting beside his coffee mug. "I see. My engineering teams have been working nonstop. I hope they solve it." "So do I." Her voice remained composed, but the urgency underneath it was impossible to miss. "Mr. Calloway." "Yes. Several people told me you've been documenting unusual vibrations near press line 4 for weeks." Nathan slowly opened the notebook to the last page. Every observation, every timestamp, every frequency, still there. "I have. Why wasn't I informed?" Nathan answered honestly. "I don't know." Another pause. Then she asked the question he hadn't expected. "Would you be willing to tell me exactly what you heard?" Nathan looked through the kitchen window toward the empty swing in the backyard where Owen used to spend entire afternoons after school. He wasn't thinking about the machine. He was thinking about the people standing beside it. "I'll tell you what I noticed," he said quietly. "But before anyone tries to restart that equipment." His voice grew firmer. "Make absolutely sure nobody is standing inside the safety perimeter." The line went completely silent. For the first time that morning, the CEO wasn't thinking about a $12 million machine. She was thinking about why the man holding the mop sounded far more concerned about human lives than the people responsible for the factory. Nathan arrived at Hawthorne Precision Systems 40 minutes later, but he didn't drive through the employee entrance. His security badge no longer worked. Instead, a security officer met him outside the administration building and escorted him through the front lobby like a visitor. Employees looked up as he walked past. Some recognized him immediately. A few offered quiet nods. Others simply looked confused. By the time he reached the production floor, the factory sounded different. Or rather, it didn't. The constant rhythm that usually filled the building had been replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Conveyors stood still. Robotic arms remained frozen halfway through unfinished cycles. Dozens of workers waited in small groups, unable to do anything except speculate. Near the center of the floor, Evelyn Brooks stood beside a cluster of engineers studying live diagnostic screens. She turned as Nathan approached. "Mr. Calloway." "Nathan is fine." She extended her hand. "I'm Evelyn." He shook it. Her grip was firm but noticeably tense. "Thank you for coming. I came because people are standing beside equipment they don't fully understand. Not because of the company. Not because of the paycheck he no longer had. Because shifts like this still included people he had worked beside every night." Evelyn motioned toward the engineering station. "Our maintenance director believes it's a servo synchronization failure." Another engineer disagreed. "I think it's software." A third interrupted. "The hydraulic pressure readings don't support either theory." Nathan quietly listened without joining the debate. Instead of walking toward the computer screens, he walked toward press line 4 itself. He stood beside the massive enclosure without touching anything. Then he crouched near the concrete floor, closed his eyes, and listened. The silence lasted almost 30 seconds. One engineer whispered to another, "What's he doing?" Nathan opened his eyes. "Who cleaned beneath the coolant return panels yesterday?" The question caught everyone off guard. A sanitation worker near the back slowly raised her hand. "I did." Nathan smiled politely. "Did you notice any unusual smell?" She hesitated. "It smelled warmer. Like burned oil." "No." She thought for another second. "Almost sweet." Nathan nodded. "Thank you." He turned toward another employee. "You've been running this line all week, right?" The machine operator answered. "Yes." "When did the vibration first start?" "I don't know." Nathan looked at him patiently. "You do." The operator frowned, replaying the past few shifts in his mind. "Tuesday. Worse after lunch." The operator's eyes widened. "Yeah. Every day." "I think so." Nathan continued walking. He wasn't interviewing managers. He was interviewing the people who spent 12 hours beside the machine. Within 15 minutes, he had spoken with a sanitation worker, 2 operators, an electrician, a maintenance mechanic, and the forklift driver who delivered replacement components. Each person remembered one small detail. None believed it mattered. Together, the details formed something much larger. Nathan finally returned to Evelyn. "I need one thing before we go any further." "What is it?" "I don't want another meeting where only department heads speak." She looked around the production floor. The people closest to the machine were standing 20 feet away, while supervisors answered every question. Nathan continued. "The people who hear it. The people who clean around it. The people who repair it. The people who run it. They all need to be in the same room." One senior manager immediately objected. "That's not how investigations work." Nathan looked at him calmly. "Maybe that's why you're still investigating." Silence spread across the production floor. Evelyn glanced from the frozen production line to the anxious faces surrounding it. For the first time since becoming CEO, she realized every report on her desk had traveled through layers of management before reaching her. Somewhere along the way, small observations had become invisible. She made her decision. "Conference room B," she said firmly. 30 minutes. "Everyone who touched this machine during the last month is invited." One supervisor frowned. "You mean everyone?" Evelyn nodded. "No, I mean everyone." Conference room B had never been this crowded. Machine operators sat beside electrical technicians. Maintenance mechanics shared tables with sanitation workers. A forklift driver leaned against the back wall, while quality inspectors flipped through notebooks filled with handwritten observations. Several supervisors looked uncomfortable. They weren't used to meetings where everyone had an equal chance to speak. Nathan stood beside a whiteboard instead of at the head of the table. "I'm not here to prove anyone wrong," he began calmly. "I'm here because every person in this room knows one piece of the story." He picked up a marker and drew a large circle. "This is the machine." Then he pointed around the room. "Nobody here sees all of it." He turned to the sanitation worker who had mentioned the unusual smell. "What changed first?" She thought for a moment. "The floor beneath the coolant return line stayed warmer than normal." Nathan wrote, "Warm return line." He looked at the machine operator. "You said the vibration got worse after lunch." "Every afternoon." Nathan added another note. Next came the electrician. "I replaced a damaged cable 3 weeks ago." The maintenance mechanic followed. "We adjusted one pressure valve during scheduled service." Then the forklift driver spoke. "The replacement filter housing looked slightly different from the old shipment." Nathan didn't interrupt, didn't correct anyone. He simply filled the board with facts. When everyone finished, he stepped back. No single note explained the shutdown. Together, they formed a pattern. Evelyn quietly studied the whiteboard. "None of these reports reached my office." Nathan nodded. "Because none of them looked important by themselves." He drew arrows connecting the observations. A warmer return line. A replacement component with slightly different tolerances. A pressure adjustment. A vibration that gradually changed. He looked around the room. Everyone noticed something. No one knew how their observation connected to someone else's. One senior engineer crossed his arms. "So what's your conclusion?" Nathan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the production window overlooking press line 4. "The machine isn't failing because one part broke." He turned back toward the room. "It's failing because several small changes slowly pushed the system outside the conditions it was designed to handle." Silence settled over the room. Not disbelief. Recognition. The maintenance mechanic slowly nodded. If that's true, Nathan finished the sentence. Then replacing another. Motor won't solve anything. Evelyn looked toward the engineering team. How long would it take to verify his theory? The lead engineer hesitated. If we test every interaction instead of every individual component. He glanced at Nathan before continuing. Probably several hours. And if we restart now? Evelyn asked. Nathan met her eyes. You might get production back. He paused. Or you might destroy the evidence that's trying to tell us what's really wrong. Without another word, Evelyn reached for the radio clipped to her jacket. Maintain the shutdown. No restart authorization until every interaction has been verified. A few managers exchanged uneasy looks. Every hour offline would cost the company a fortune. Nathan wasn't thinking about the money. He was thinking about something much harder to replace than a $12 million machine. Trust. Once people stopped listening to each other, no equipment in the world could keep a factory truly safe. The engineering lab became unusually quiet once everyone stopped arguing and started testing. Instead of surrounding the machine with managers giving orders, Nathan spread people across the entire production line. Nobody works alone, he said. If you discover something, say it out loud. Don't wait until you're certain. The instruction felt strange to some of the engineers. They had spent years believing the person with the highest title should always provide the final answer. Nathan believed something different. Good information became valuable the moment it was shared, not the moment it became perfect. By early afternoon, the first round of inspections was complete. Electrical systems passed. Hydraulics showed no major leaks. Software diagnostics reported only minor communication delays. One of the senior engineers folded his arms. We're back where we started. Nathan shook his head. No. He walked toward a large monitor displaying performance logs collected over the previous month. We finally know what isn't wrong. He asked the automation specialist to overlay vibration history with coolant temperatures. Nothing unusual appeared. Then he requested maintenance records beside production. Output. Still nothing. Finally, he looked toward a young process technician named Mia. Can you add replacement part history to the same timeline? She hesitated. I've never compared all three. Neither has anyone else. Within minutes, colored lines began crossing the screen. The room grew silent. The unusual vibration didn't begin after a software update. It didn't begin after preventive maintenance. It began 3 days after a replacement filter housing from a new supplier had been installed. The component met every published specification, at least individually. Nathan leaned closer. Zoom in. Mia enlarged the engineering drawings. The dimensional differences were almost invisible. Less than a millimeter. The lead engineer frowned. That shouldn't matter. By itself, Nathan agreed. But nothing in this room happens by itself. He picked up a marker and sketched the interaction between coolant flow, pressure regulation, and vibration dampening. The housing changes the flow pattern just enough. He drew another arrow. The adjusted pressure valve compensates. Another arrow. The warmer coolant changes viscosity. One final arrow. The vibration slowly moves outside acceptable tolerance. Nobody interrupted. The explanation wasn't dramatic. It was logical. Every small change had been reasonable. Together, they created a condition nobody had tested. One maintenance supervisor quietly admitted. Each department approved its own change. Nathan nodded. And nobody evaluated how all the changes would affect one another. Evelyn stood near the back of the room, listening more than speaking. For the first time since arriving, she realized the shutdown wasn't exposing one technical mistake. It was exposing an organizational habit. Departments solved their own problems. Very few people asked what those solutions might create somewhere else. Late that afternoon, the engineering team proposed reinstalling the original filter housing and restarting the line. Several executives immediately supported the idea. If it works, one of them said, we'll be producing again before midnight. Nathan didn't answer right away. He walked to the production floor and studied the machine through the inspection window. After nearly a minute, he turned back. I don't recommend restarting. The room filled with puzzled expressions. The lead engineer looked surprised. But we found the interaction. We found one interaction. Nathan spoke calmly. Not the entire chain. He pointed toward the pressure logs. The machine protected itself today. If another condition still exists, The next shutdown might not happen safely. One executive sighed impatiently. Every extra hour costs this company hundreds of thousands of dollars. Nathan met his eyes without raising his voice. I understand. Then he looked around the room at operators, mechanics, electricians, and sanitation workers who had quietly gathered near the doorway. But if we're choosing between losing money today and risking someone's life tomorrow, he let the sentence finish itself. Nobody spoke. The silence wasn't resistance anymore. It was reflection. Evelyn slowly removed her glasses and set them on the conference table. When I accepted this job, she said quietly, I promised the board I would protect this company. She looked first at the executives, then at the people wearing steel-toe boots and work gloves. I've been thinking too narrowly. She picked up the radio clipped to her jacket. This is Evelyn Brooks. Her voice carried across the silent production floor. Press line 4 remains offline until every interaction has been independently verified. We are not restarting because we hope. We're restarting because we know. For the first time that day, Nathan allowed himself a small smile. Not because the machine was any closer to running, but because the right question had finally become more important than the fastest answer. By sunrise the next morning, Hawthorne Precision Systems looked less like a factory in crisis and more like a classroom. The production line remained silent. Instead of rushing toward a quick restart, small teams spread across the facility with clipboards, tablets, and inspection tools. Nathan had insisted on changing one simple rule. Nobody would inspect the same department they normally worked in. An electrician partnered with a machine operator. A maintenance mechanic worked beside a sanitation technician. A quality inspector shadowed a forklift driver. At first, the arrangement felt awkward. People kept apologizing for asking basic questions. Nathan encouraged the opposite. If you don't understand something, he said, that's exactly when you should ask. Curiosity slowly replaced pride. Evelyn walked through the production floor without her usual group of executives following behind. She stopped beside every team, not to give instructions, but to listen. For the first time since becoming CEO, she realized how much practical knowledge never appeared in reports. Near press line 4, Nathan watched a sanitation technician named Rosa point toward a narrow section beneath the coolant manifold. Every Thursday, she said, I had to wipe away a thin mist right here. The maintenance mechanic looked surprised. Why didn't anyone tell us? Rosa smiled uneasily. I thought everyone already knew. Nathan nodded. That's how most important information gets lost. They removed a protective panel and found a hairline crack beginning to form around a mounting bracket. The crack wasn't causing the shutdown, but under full production, it could eventually allow vibration to spread into neighboring assemblies. Another small piece of the puzzle. Across the room, the electrician discovered that several cable supports had gradually shifted because of the changing vibration pattern. Individually, none of the findings explained the failure. Together, they confirmed Nathan's theory. The machine hadn't suffered one catastrophic breakdown. It had been quietly drifting away from its original operating conditions for months. Late that afternoon, the engineering conference room filled once again. This time the whiteboard looked different. Instead of isolated notes, it displayed a complete chain of cause and effect stretching across multiple departments. No arrows pointed toward a single person. No red circles marked one employee's mistake. Only a sequence of reasonable decisions that had never been examined together. One of the senior engineers leaned back in his chair. I've worked here 18 years. He looked around the room before continuing. I don't think I've ever attended a meeting where I learned more from operators and sanitation than from technical manuals. No one laughed. The statement wasn't embarrassing. It was honest. Evelyn quietly closed the folder in front of her. I owe everyone here an apology. The room became still. We built reporting systems that filtered information instead of connecting it. She looked directly at Nathan. We asked people to stay inside their job descriptions. Then she glanced toward Rosa and the others. When we should have been asking everyone to protect each other. Nathan shook his head gently. This isn't about blaming yesterday. He walked toward the whiteboard. If we spend all our energy finding one person to blame. He erased a large circle someone had drawn around the replacement part. We'll miss the next problem before it even begins. The room fell silent again. Not because anyone had run out of answers, but because they had finally begun asking better questions. Outside the conference room windows, the silent production line waited. The repair itself was now within reach. The harder work had already begun. A factory that once divided people by job title was slowly learning to trust knowledge wherever it was found. The temporary replacement housing had been installed. The cracked mounting bracket had been reinforced. Every cable support was back within specification. By late afternoon, Press Line 4 stood ready for its first controlled test. No one celebrated. Not yet. Nathan walked slowly around the machine one last time, stopping every few feet to compare handwritten notes with the updated inspection checklist. The production floor remained unusually quiet. Even the executives who had spent the previous day demanding faster answers now waited without interrupting. One of the engineers approached Nathan. "Everything checks out." Nathan looked at him. "Mechanically, yes. Electronically, yes. Hydraulically, yes." Nathan folded the checklist. "Good." The engineer smiled. "So, we're ready." Nathan didn't return the smile. "We're ready for the next question." He walked to the control station and asked the machine operator to begin the startup sequence at the lowest possible production load. The massive system came alive one section at a time. Cooling pumps, hydraulic pressure, servo drives, conveyor synchronization. Every value appeared normal. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The vibration that had haunted Nathan's notebook for weeks never returned. Several supervisors exchanged relieved smiles. One executive stepped toward Evelyn. "I think we've got it." Nathan raised one hand. "Keep monitoring." Nobody argued. 20 more minutes passed. The machine continued operating smoothly. Production samples met every quality standard. Only then did Nathan walk closer to the operator's console. "Increase the load by 10%. The operator looked toward Evelyn. She simply nodded. Another test. Another successful cycle. Then another. The room slowly relaxed. Finally, the lead engineer let out a long breath. "I've been trying to solve this by looking for one broken part." Nathan smiled gently. Most difficult problems don't arrive as one big mistake. They arrive as dozens of small ones that never meet each other. Just then, the plant's chief financial officer hurried onto the production floor holding a tablet. "Evelyn." She turned. "The board is asking when we'll return to full production. They're concerned about customer deadlines." Several managers looked toward her, expecting an immediate answer. Instead, she looked at Nathan. "If this were your decision," he answered without hesitation, "I'd keep the line at reduced capacity for the next 24 hours. The CFO frowned. "That will cost us another fortune." Nathan nodded. "It probably will. But we've spent 2 days proving we don't know everything. I don't think today is the right day to become overconfident again." Silence followed. Evelyn slowly folded her arms. When she finally spoke, her voice carried across the production floor. "Reduced production for 24 hours. We monitor every cycle. If anything changes." Nathan finished the sentence. "We stop immediately." The CEO smiled. "Exactly." No one applauded. There was no dramatic celebration. Only quiet agreement. As employees returned to their stations, something subtle had changed. Operators asked mechanics if they noticed anything unusual. Mechanics checked with sanitation crews before closing inspection panels. Engineers stood beside machine operators instead of behind conference tables. The factory wasn't simply restarting production. It was learning a different way to work. Before leaving the floor, Evelyn caught up with Nathan near the exit. "I've been thinking about yesterday." He looked at her. "I almost asked you to come back because we needed your experience." She paused. "Now I realize that's too small." Nathan waited. "We don't need one expert." She looked across the production line where people from different departments were still talking together long after the emergency had passed. "We need a culture where nobody's knowledge disappears just because of the uniform they're wearing." Nathan glanced toward the workers, then toward the machine that had quietly returned to life. For the first time since losing his job, he felt something stronger than vindication. He felt hope, not because one machine had been repaired, but because an entire factory had finally started listening before something far more difficult to repair had been lost. 24 hours passed without a single unexpected shutdown. Every monitored cycle stayed within the new safety limits. The vibration Nathan had first noticed weeks earlier never returned. But inside Hawthorne Precision Systems, nobody acted as though the crisis had simply disappeared. At 9 o'clock Friday morning, Evelyn called an all-hands meeting on the production floor. Instead of gathering in the executive conference room, Folding chairs were arranged between the silent production lines where everyone, from executives to janitorial staff, could stand on the same level. No stage, no reserved seating, no special section for management. Nathan almost stayed near the back until one of the machine operators waved him forward. "You belong up here." He smiled politely, but remained standing beside the operators instead of the executives. That felt right. Evelyn stepped to the microphone, holding only a single sheet of paper. "For the last 3 days," she began, "many people have asked me one question." She looked around the room. "Who fixed the $12 million machine?" Her eyes moved toward Nathan before returning to the crowd. The truthful answer is, no single person did. A quiet murmur spread through the room. The machine was repaired because operators, sanitation staff, maintenance mechanics, engineers, inspectors, and supervisors finally shared what each of them already knew. She paused. "Our biggest failure wasn't technical. It was organizational." No one argued. Everyone in the building had lived through it. Evelyn continued. "Effective today, every production concern submitted by any employee will receive documented technical review. No report will be closed without written feedback. Cross-department safety meetings will become part of every maintenance cycle." Several workers exchanged surprised glances. Those weren't promises about the future. They were policy changes beginning immediately. Then Evelyn did something nobody expected. She invited Rosa, the sanitation technician, the machine operator, the electrician, the maintenance mechanic, Mia from process engineering, and finally, Nathan, not to receive awards, not for a photograph, simply to stand together. "This," Evelyn said, "is what solving a difficult problem actually looks like." Applause slowly filled the production floor. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. He had never liked being the center of attention. After the meeting ended, employees drifted back toward their departments. Curtis Donnelly remained behind. For several seconds, he simply looked at Nathan. "I owe you an apology." Nathan didn't interrupt. Curtis took a slow breath. "When you filed those reports, I thought you were trying to tell my department how to do its job." Nathan nodded. "I know. I never actually read them." "I know." Curtis looked down at the concrete floor. "I judged the person before I considered the information." Nathan studied him quietly. Then he held out the small spiral notebook he had carried in his back pocket for years. Curtis looked confused. "Take it." "I can't." "You should." Curtis carefully opened it. Every page contained dates, temperatures, sounds, sketches, and observations. Not complaints. Not opinions. Evidence. Nathan smiled. "The notebook never cared what job title I had." Curtis slowly closed the cover. "I'll remember that." Later that afternoon, Evelyn met Nathan in the now-quiet production area. "I'd like to offer you your position back." Nathan wasn't surprised. He had expected the conversation eventually. She continued. "Actually," she smiled faintly, "I'd like to create a new position." Nathan gently shook his head before she finished. "I appreciate that, but I can't accept." She looked genuinely curious. "May I ask why?" Nathan glanced through the large windows overlooking the factory floor where teams from different departments were now talking together while reviewing inspection checklists. "For years, I believed my responsibility ended with the work assigned to me." He looked back at Evelyn. "I was wrong. I should have found better ways to make people hear what mattered." He paused. "And your company has already started changing." She nodded. "It has. I don't want that change to depend on whether I'm employed here." The words lingered between them. Evelyn smiled with quiet understanding. "So what happens next?" Nathan looked toward the parking lot where his old pickup truck waited. "This machine is running again." He smiled. "There are plenty of others across the country that aren't." For the first time since the shutdown began, neither of them was talking about repairing equipment. They were talking about preventing the next crisis before it ever had a chance to begin. 3 months later, the production floor at Hawthorne Precision Systems sounded exactly as it should. Steady, balanced, predictable. Machines moved with quiet precision. But the biggest difference couldn't be measured by sensors or production numbers. It could be seen in conversations. An operator no longer hesitated to ask an engineer a question. A mechanic routinely checked with the sanitation crew before closing an inspection panel. Supervisors read maintenance notes before approving schedules. Small observations no longer disappeared simply because they came from the wrong uniform. Nathan Calloway hadn't returned as an employee. That decision surprised many people at first. Instead, He registered a small consulting business from the converted garage beside his modest home. His office wasn't impressive. One workbench, a laptop, shelves lined with technical manuals, notebooks, and well-used tools. Above the desk hung a framed photograph of his late wife beside a recent picture of Owen proudly holding the model airplane they had finally completed together. His business focused on something many companies overlooked, not repairing expensive machines, teaching people how to recognize problems before machines ever failed. Word spread faster than he expected. One factory recommended another, then another. Soon his calendar filled with visits to manufacturers that wanted something more valuable than emergency repairs. They wanted teams that actually listened to one another. One crisp autumn morning, Nathan drove back to Hawthorne, not as an employee entering through the security gate, but as an invited consultant. The receptionist smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Calloway." He smiled back. "Nathan is just fine." When he entered the training room, Evelyn Brooks was already there with department leaders, operators, maintenance mechanics, sanitation staff, quality inspectors, and engineers seated together. No executive table. No separate sections. Exactly the way she had promised. She welcomed everyone with a simple sentence. "Today's lesson isn't about a machine. It's about the people who keep it running." Nathan stepped to the front carrying two objects. In one hand was the old mop he had kept from his final night shift. In the other was the small spiral notebook that had traveled in his back pocket for years. He placed both on the table without saying a word. The room became quiet. Finally, he spoke. Most people noticed the mop. He rested his hand on the worn handle. "It told them what my job was." Then he touched the notebook. Almost nobody noticed this. He opened it, revealing pages filled with dates, temperatures, sketches, and careful observations. "It told the truth about what I saw." He looked around the room. "The lesson isn't that everyone should become an expert. The lesson is that expertise can be ignored when people stop respecting where information comes from." Nobody reached for a phone. Nobody whispered. Every person in the room understood exactly what he meant. After the session ended, Evelyn walked beside Nathan toward the parking lot. "I used to think leadership meant having the right answers," she admitted. Nathan smiled. "I think leadership is making sure the right voices can be heard." She nodded. "And we're still learning. So are all of us." Before driving home, Nathan stopped at Owen's school. His son climbed into the truck carrying a science project built from recycled parts. "Guess what?" Owen said with a grin. "Our teacher said the best idea in class came from the quietest kid." Nathan laughed softly. "What did you tell him?" "I said good ideas don't care who says them." Nathan looked out through the windshield for a moment before starting the engine. "That's exactly right." As someone telling this story from the outside, I think that's the part worth remembering long after the $12 million machine is forgotten. A person's value is never measured by the price of the equipment they work beside, the clothes they wear, the paycheck they earn, or the title printed on an ID badge. Whether someone is wealthy or struggling to make ends meet, every person deserves respect, dignity, and kindness. When we judge people because they appear poor or because their job seems ordinary, we risk ignoring wisdom, experience, and humanity that cannot be replaced by money. Sometimes the most important voice in the room belongs to the person no one thought to ask. And when we learn to respect people before we judge them, we don't just build stronger companies. We build better communities, better families, and a better future for everyone.